afternoon, everybody. Who would like to welcome you all to this webinar. It's going to be a nice afternoon. This PIARC webinar on boosting road safety in low and middle income countries. It's going to be a very nice 2 hours presentations and discussion. Perhaps the Deputy Secretary General of PIARC would like perhaps to say a few words of introduction. Mr. Robin Sebil.
Yes, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to inform the participants, maybe they have not noticed, that today, contrarily to last week, they will benefit from an simultaneous interpretation system. So if they go on the interpretation logo, which is, I think, below on MacBooks and above on PCs or wherever it is, if you want to have interpretation into French, Spanish and English, you can choose the channel you want. So, juste pour vous obliger à le faire, je vais maintenant m'exprimer en langue française. Donc, tous ceux d'entre vous qui ne parlent pas français vont être contraints de passer sur l'anglais ou sur l'espagnol. Est-ce que cela pose des difficultés? Est-ce que tout le monde a bien trouvé le système? George, maybe you can ask, or do you have reactions?
At the chat, everything looks fine.
Bien, donc je vais continuer à parler français. J'espère que tout le monde a donc la possibilité de comprendre, et s'il y a des difficultés, que les gens n'hésitent pas à réagir dans le chat pour que nous puissions intervenir. Alors tout d'abord, je vous remercie d'être présent un vendredi après-midi ou peut-être même un vendredi soir pour certains d'entre vous. Je tiens également à m'excuser car il y a eu des difficultés techniques lors du précédent webinaire du 5 septembre. Il y a eu des limitations du nombre de participants. Certains d'entre vous peut-être n'ont pas pu se connecter et je vous prie de nous en excuser. Donc aujourd'hui, alors donc un petit mot pour ceux qui n'étaient pas là la dernière fois. Il s'agit d'un important travail que nous avons entrepris avec l'Université technique d'Athènes et avec le financement d'un certain nombre de nos États membres, notamment les États-Unis, la Grande-Bretagne, l'Australie, la Nouvelle-Zélande et le Canada, Québec, pour non pas créer de nouvelles connaissances, mais tout simplement pour faire connaître beaucoup plus largement toutes celles que PIARC a accumulées au cours d'années et de dizaines d'années de travail sur le thème de la sécurité routière. Nous avons dans notre site internet, pour ceux qui sont familiers de PIARC, une très riche base de données sur ce thème, de très nombreux rapports techniques, et nous disposons également d'un outil assez unique qui est le manuel de sécurité routière, manuel électronique que vous pouvez aussi trouver au travers du site piarc.org et qui, je crois, est une véritable mine de documents qui se veulent le plus pratique possible pour les ingénieurs, les concepteurs, les exploitants de la route. Donc l'objet de nos travaux d'aujourd'hui n'est pas de présenter de nouvelles choses, même si certaines, ça ne veut pas dire pour autant que ce sont des informations anciennes ou vieillies, elles sont à la pointe du progrès, mais il s'agit de vous présenter dans différents sujets, donc 4 nouveaux sujets, nous en avions évoqué 4 la dernière fois, donc comme vous le voyez, la gestion de la sécurité routière, le problème des usagers vulnérables de la route, la prise en considération des facteurs humains et du comportement dans la survenue d'accidents, et enfin la sécurité des véhicules. Dans tous ces sujets, donc un expert pris parmi les comités techniques de PIARC compétents vous présentera la connaissance que nous avons accumulée au cours de nombreuses années. Donc, ce sera court, hein, nous avons 2 heures devant nous seulement. Il s'agit surtout pour vous de faire connaissance avec ce dont nous disposons. So I see someone reacting in the chat about my speaking French. Apparently, so for the people who do not listen to English, please have a look into the interpretation system. And normally, if you choose English, okay. So I'm told that English interpretation seems not to be active. So if it be the case, please, our interpreters should react, or George, make sure it works. So briefly speaking, sorry for that. I will sum up so for those who are listening to Spanish, if the Analud or others, is Spanish interpretation working?
Yes, it is working.
Okay, so apparently we have no interpretation in English for the time being. I don't know whether this has been fixed, so I will, sorry for that, I didn't know. I will continue in English. So briefly speaking, we'll have 4 topics this afternoon, the one that are on the screen. The lectures that will be delivered aim at giving you the desire to go further into our database and road safety manual, and maybe for some of you to engage in the future in our technical committee. I will stop speaking here. I'll give back the floor to George. I hope that the issue with the English interpretation has been settled. But in any case, as I was probably the only French speaker, I don't think it's going to be an issue for the next presentations. Thank you, and sorry for that.
Thanks a lot, Robin. It's clear that we're going to demonstrate all the PIARC wealth on road safety with special emphasis on low and middle income countries. And without spending more time, I would like to suggest to have with the first presentation concerning road safety management by Samantha Cockfield, who's the head of road safety of the Australian Transport Accident Commission, and has already worked on this topic and make us the presentation. So Samantha, you can take the screen.
Thank you. I am, as you say, from Australia, but today I'm actually coming to you from Malta, so it means that I'm in the same time zone as you, which makes me very happy instead of 2 a.m. in the morning. Hopefully. Okay, can you all see my full screen now? Excellent. So it's my pleasure to be able to talk to you about road safety management, the fundamentals. What we'll do is have a quick talk about some of the issues that you might see, particularly in lower middle income countries, some of the measures that we might take to address those issues, and some recommendations at the end from PIARC. I'll move quite quickly, but there'll be time for questions at the end. So just some basic facts to start off with. We know that having a lead road safety agency is very helpful in terms of getting road safety outcomes. And some work we've done shows us that most low middle income countries, 87%, do actually have a lead agency to guide their national road safety efforts. But only 66% of those actually have funding to do their work through their national budget. We see that's more so in Europe than and some of our Asian countries than in the Middle East and North Africa. We also know that most countries do have a national road safety strategy, and again higher in some countries such as South Asian countries compared to the Sub-Saharan African region. So we're mainly on a good start wherever we are in the world. Some of the key issues that we know are important for low middle income countries is having not only a lead road safety agency, but also having an agency that has got full-time expert staff. And we'll talk about some of the issues that they can help with. We know that we need to have clear road safety strategies that also have targets for us to reach, funding dedicated to road safety, if possible, crash data and using other data sets too, like registration and licensing. And if we can, we'd like to have investigations into the causes and the circumstances of specific crashes and specific locations. In terms of what we know about some of the organisational structures and the deficiencies we see, we know the most important thing is to have appropriate management capacity so that your lead agency has very good capacity. But some of the things we see where we have deficiencies are lack of good leadership, lack of political priority, where we don't see that road safety is a key issue for a nation or a jurisdiction. If we do even have some priority and leadership, if we don't have the funding to help fix the problems and help with our interventions, that's a big problem as well. But probably the biggest area that we really see lacking is expertise, and really that's what today and the other set of PIARC Exchange is about, improving the expertise. And we know that if you see some of these functions, they all weaken the institutional power of any lead agency. Just in relation specifically to data, we know that there are some types of crashes that are predictable, and therefore we can actually do some work without having good data sources. But what we know is having data, at least the basic crash data, it helps us prioritise where we send our funds, what interventions we fund. It helps us evaluate the impact of our investments, so understand how well they're performing for us. But it also helps strengthen relationships and collaboration between agencies, because we all understand the issue we're working on, and sometimes we can come at that one issue from different directions. So knowing that there are some of the issues we face, we've got some key measures, road safety management measures that we can undertake to address the issues. I don't know whether you've seen this, I suppose it's a chart before, but the UN produced this for the Decade of Action a couple of years ago, and I personally find it very useful and use it quite a lot. I won't go into the detail here, but if you follow this generally about what to do, how to do it, and who is to do it, it's a very good strategic approach to addressing road safety. So that approach that you've just seen talks primarily about the safe system approach to road safety. And it's what underpins the UN second action, Decade of Action for Road Safety, which has a goal of reducing all traffic deaths and very serious injuries by 50% by 2030. We know that the development of an effective strategy starts very much at the safe system approach. And we've seen in the leading jurisdictions around the world, places like Sweden, Norway, and other places like the UK as well, that the principles of safe system have meant that they've done very well in terms of reducing the number of people killed and seriously injured. The underlying system is also a very efficient management system, and it helps with leadership because it provides a very clear path forward in terms of road safety. Some of you will probably already know this, but the underlying elements of the safe system, or the principles of the safe system, is that we do not accept that anybody should be killed or seriously injured in their travels on our roads. Probably the important element here for safe system is that humans make mistakes, and we actually have to plan for those mistakes. We can't assume we can just change people's behaviour. We've got to assume that people will make mistakes, and we need to plan the road safety system for it. We also know that humans are vulnerable, and when we apply certain energy forces to humans, to the human body, they'll start to break down, be injured, and unfortunately sometimes be killed. If we understand the energy forces to the body, of course, we can plan better to protect the body from those energy forces. Road safety responsibility is shared. Not only is it a government responsibility, but for civil society, corporate society as well. It's also proactive. We're not always waiting for crashes to happen. We're actually looking ahead. We know some of the key issues that mean that people are likely to be killed and seriously injured. So if we don't have a footpath and we've got pedestrians, we know that people will have to intermingle with traffic and may get killed or seriously injured. The other thing is that we also plan in Safe System for redundancy. That means that we usually try and have more than one intervention to address the same issue. So it might be that we use vehicle safety and if road infrastructure to try and address the same issue. Just in terms of the framework that a country may use in relation to Safe System, and really crucial, I think, for anybody working in road safety, if you look at the diagram here on the right, is having these three levels of, I suppose, interventions or management functions. The top one being I suppose actually the main one for us being that the institutional management functions, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a minute, but then the interventions that we can use to directly address our road safety issues, particularly if you think about things like vulnerable road users, how we plan and design our systems really important, and then how we plan for our results, so how we measure our results, and also our outcomes. This is important not only for the end result, and so for many of us the end result is our 50% reduction by 2030, but also having some interim measures to know if we're getting to the desired results along the way. I think particularly when we look at interventions, we know that they primarily need to be delivered by government agencies who have the responsibility for road safety, but we can also do this in partnership with civil society and business. Government doesn't need to be the only delivery agent, but we do need government to usually coordinate any road safety strategy and interventions. We also need very much the help of the research and our professional community. And no matter where you are in the world, there is usually a university or a research organisation willing to help. Just about what those institutional management functions are and should be, and these are the ones that are really helpful. Coordination to make sure that interventions are aligned, we don't have duplication, and we make sure that they're well developed with a good evidence base. We should have legislation to support our interventions and to ensure that people understand the specific legal boundaries of key road safety issues, things like speeding, drinking and driving, obviously other issues as well. Funding and resource allocation, how we fund interventions, and how sustainable that funding is very important, and it's a really important function for any institution that's looking after road safety, promotion of road safety, making sure that our communities know right around the country what our key road safety issues are and how they as individuals can actually, how individuals can support the delivery of interventions. And if you think of something like drinking and driving or speeding, knowing that we must obey the law is incredibly important if we expect people to do that. Again, monitoring, analysing and evaluation, making sure that we know our interventions are working and that we can adjust them if they're not working in the way we expected to is really important. Again, research, development and knowledge transfer. So actually doing the research specific to our country or our jurisdiction, making sure that we then transfer any knowledge we have to others to make sure that we are doing our best across our country. In terms of strategies that we can use to actually intervene, and most of these will be subject to separate webinar or separate presentations in this webinar. Probably the first and most important thing we can do as proactive road safety practitioners is design our transport system, our road system, in an effective and proactive way. That means thinking about what the issues are and planning for them ahead of necessarily seeing crashes. We need to encourage the use of the safest modes of transport and the safest routes. So that might mean not necessarily using a car or necessarily even using a bicycle, but something like a bus or a train might be the safest way. We can always improve things by separating our most vulnerable people from vehicle transport. And so things like footpaths and separated bike lanes are very important. Managing speeds, making sure our speed limits and then are appropriate for the types of conditions we have. And then when we have the right speed limits, making sure that we enforce them, that people aren't going faster than the speed limits. Providing things like protective barriers on roadsides are important. And of course, I know later we're talking about behaviours, and we can do a lot with both promotion and police to talk to people about how we can ensure that people know what the law is, but also then encourage to make sure they behave and act within the law. Vehicle standards, again, a separate presentation today. Last but not least, post-crash care, making sure we have access to good medical help, ambulances, and then diagnosis and care once we get to the hospital is important. Probably last but not least, in terms of our management issues, in terms of the interventions, is setting targets. What is the outcome that we hope to see from all our interventions, and making sure that this target is accepted particularly by government, but other stakeholders in the system, and is understood by the community as well. We need to think of the long term. So we need to think about where we want to be in the long term, and for many jurisdictions around the world, they've chosen to have nobody killed or seriously injured by 2050. But also, what are some of the shorter and medium term targets we want to achieve in terms of particularly fatalities and serious injuries, but also the other social costs. So the 2030 goal of 50% reduction is very much a medium term target for many jurisdictions. Intermediate outcomes, really they tell us whether we're on the way to getting to our final outcome, very important. Also, of course, measuring our physical outcomes, particularly if we're looking at road infrastructure, or maybe the percentage of cars that have new vehicle safety features in them. Very important to continuing to set a goal and then measure these. One of the other things that we can do that it's starting to be for more sophisticated road safety practitioners and road safety jurisdictions, but road safety audits are a really good way of checking when we're undertaking planning for new or maybe rehabilitating roads, of making sure that we're getting the best outcomes. It allows us to systematically look at a road and on safety principles, understand from the road user's point of view what the road is indicating that we should be doing in terms of driving or as a pedestrian or a cyclist, and making sure that people are going to be able to understand intuitively what it is actually required of them on that road system. And if that is not going to happen, we can make the changes at a design stage rather than I suppose later down the track, once we've already built the road or actually rehabilitated the road. The audits actually help us ensure that highway schemes operate as safely as practicable, and it's a very practical thing that we can all do. It obviously minimises the number of crashes, but more so ensures that we get good road safety outcomes from any changes we are making to the road system. It also helps us in terms of doing these audits, then share our knowledge about what types of changes are needed in any community with road safety practitioners, engineers, designers, etc. Another opportunity is to do on-site reviews of existing road sections and intersections with experienced road safety experts. And there are lots of these, I suppose, experts around the world who are often happy to come to low and middle income countries to help train and talk to people about what could be changed, and sometimes at very low cost and some really quite minor changes. But the key thing they would do is look at where the hazardous conditions are, what the key faults and deficiencies that are in the road system, and try and help. And this is particularly important on roads with high vehicle traffic numbers, to see that on site, going to the actual the road and looking at what's happening and seeing how you can better design it. So just quickly to some recommendations before I finish. These are from PIARC, is that it's really important to really understand and build awareness of the safe system approach and the possibilities it provides. We need to ensure that road safety management and leadership will build to a strong, or to actually build to a strong outcome. We need to actually see what we can all do. And one of the key things is if we can develop a strong lead agency. A strong lead agency, as discussed, with expert staff, having the right legal powers and the right levels of support, is the most important thing I think we can do in terms of any jurisdiction, is the starting point. Next, if we can collect robust road safety data and develop a system so that many people can access that data, that's really, very helpful in terms of developing both road safety strategies and interventions. And last but not least, developing a robust set of local guidelines and regulations, making sure that the guidelines and the regulations that you have relate specifically to your jurisdiction and are workable and understandable, not only by engineers and road safety practitioners and experts, but also the average person who uses the road network. Ideally, these are probably I think the key issues in green are probably the most important things we can do. But ideally, we'd also start to talk at university level about developing programs at both bachelor and master's level, so that we can, I suppose, have a range of people with expertise coming through our system. There's a range of regional road safety observatories who can assist particularly in terms of development of data systems and collection of data. And they, of course, help link to an international network of centres of excellence. And last but not least, when we become a bit more mature, building our own centre of excellence in our own country is really quite important. I think probably just a couple of things is that a small percentage of roads often do account for a large percentage of the deaths and serious injuries we see. We normally know where these roads are, which roads they are. Often they're the ones with the most traffic on them. Even if we don't have good data sources, if we attack those roads first, that is really important. last but not least, you can see there some policy priorities that we all should consider in terms of road safety management, and you can see them all there, and the presentation will be up. With that, I think my time is up. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was quite comprehensive. We would like to encourage everybody to use chat in order to submit any questions during or after the presentation.
I'm sorry if there was any questions. I didn't see any come up on my screen.
There is no question so far.
Okay.
However, if someone would like to make a question also orally, can raise their hand and they can say it orally. Still, I do have a question, which is really very appropriate, I would say, for low and middle income countries. And the issue is how we explain and how we implement the safe system approach within the authorities and the authorities' culture in low and middle income countries. Because there is a need to bridge the gap between theory and practice. And from your experience, which are the critical factors for implementing, understanding and implementing safe system approach on low and middle income countries?
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer. There's a couple of things. I think developing the capability with 2 or 3 people within your lead agency to thoroughly understand safe system is really important. And there are so many resources nowadays. If you go on to the Swedish Road Safety Agency's website, looking at the UN Decade of Action conference or that they had in 2020, actually, just before COVID started, you can see Professor Klaus Tingvall, who is really sits behind the safe system approach, talk about all the elements of that. But once you actually have some expertise in your lead agency and in your country, it is really a matter of just continuing to talk about it, continuing to use that to explain how we can make our system safer. In some ways, I think it is quite a scientific approach. So if you can talk to anybody who has some scientific understanding, that is always quite useful. If you've got a minister or a very senior bureaucrat who has a good understanding of scientific principles, the physics behind crashes and how we protect humans from those energy sources when we have a crash, it's quite intuitive if you've got any scientific knowledge. So it's one of the ways. But can I say, even in Australia, where we have been talking about safe system for 20 years, we still continue to need to explain it to people who are entering the road safety arena, so new politicians, new senior bureaucrats, so that they understand the approach we are taking.
Great. And another short question. What do you think, how critical is the role of securing a dedicated budget for road safety, separately from the road development budget and the enforcement budget? Is it something that we usually see and we see great results?
I think what's important is actually identifying the budgets that are available and making sure we prioritise these, the budget that we have available. Quite often, when I've spoken to people around the world, they talk about not so much having more money, but making sure that the money is already in the system, is used wisely And as an example, often in lower middle income countries, and I've actually just been in some, we see that money is provided, whether it's from the World Bank or a local development bank, for new roads or for upgrading roads. That's a really good opportunity to build in safety. So rather than always trying to add, I think one of the things we can do is make sure that the money we have, we understand what money is available in the system and we use it. Ideally, we would be able to get more money into the system. One of the other things I think is really important is to remind, particularly our politicians, but also our senior bureaucrats, that when we stop crashes and stop people being killed and seriously injured, it saves our health system a lot of money. We have more bed days. We have doctors and nurses who are freer to do other activities or help other areas of medical need. And I think that's another in that we can talk to and about where money should maybe be a little bit more available.
Great to have 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'm just having a look.
Yeah, for the Center of Excellence.
Yeah, just in relation to the Centre of Excellence and whether it should be linked to a university or not. My personal preference is always to link it to a university because they usually have a range of expertise to bring to any Centre of Excellence. So not everybody needs to be in the Centre of Excellence to add their expertise. So a university where you have psychologists, engineers, so often communications areas, often some of those academic areas can come to the Centre of Excellence without being full-time in that Centre of Excellence. So I personally think universities are a good place to start. So I've got this second question here, yes, the significant challenge in having politicians provide funding for interventions for road safety. I think it is important that politicians understand you can't improve the safety of the roads without some funding. But as I said, if we can convince them that sometimes that the money we already have can be either used a little differently or maybe just added to, rather than completely separately asking for a new budget, sometimes that will actually get more done than waiting for a large amount of money being dedicated to road safety. That's what we often find. Yeah, and yes.
There are 2 remarks if you want to comment. And one more question.
The translation of theory into practice is a good idea. Yeah, I think one of the things that universities can also help with when they're working with lead road safety agencies is translation of theory and research into practice. You usually need both sides of the equation to get a good outcome, so I agree with that. And the last one is about how the individual can drive road safety. Yeah, sorry. Oh, okay. Just in relation to individuals, I think particularly if you are thinking about anybody with expertise. So if you do have in your country or maybe even expatriates, so people who have maybe gone overseas and maybe, I know we have a lot of academics in Australia from lower middle income countries, trying to get people who've got the knowledge to talk to politicians who can be influential is one way of doing that, I think. But the other is people who have had experience of people being killed and seriously injured on the roads and bringing home their experience, if we can give them the knowledge of what's required. So often what it will mean is road safety agencies working with either the victims or the families of those who've been killed to transfer some of the knowledge so that when they do talk to politicians about the impact, and often their stories are very emotional and very engaging for politicians, I think what's really important is that they are asking for the right things, because most often in my experience, the things that people who are victims or those advocating for change are usually looking for behavioural change, often to punish more people who have caused the crash, when we know the key things that are really going to change road safety outcomes for everyone are things like better road infrastructure, safe speed limits, and safe vehicles that have all the latest safety features on, that will do things like stop when they see danger rather than relying on the individual. And it's that idea underlying safe system, which is no matter what, humans will continue to make errors that people find very difficult to understand. And it's probably the one area we can really help all individuals, I think, better understand why, even if everybody behaved as perfectly as they could, we would still have road crashes.
Great. And with this, I think that we conclude this first presentation. It was excellent presentation, excellent discussion. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you, John.
Let's get to practice everywhere with the principles you presented.
Thank you.
And with this, we can proceed to the next presentation. We're going to discuss about the key issue of vulnerable road users. And this is a presentation by Lawrence Choke, project manager and lead for road safety in the northern region of the South African National Roads Agency, and member of the PIARC Road Safety Technical Committee. So, Lawrence, you're already sharing your screen.
Okay,
Please.
thank you very much, George. I'm not sure if you can see my face.
We see your face, we see the screen, perfect.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Greetings to everyone who managed to join this webinar today. I'm glad to be part of this session. Like George has already said, my presentation will cover challenges that are faced by our vulnerable road users. As part of this presentation, I'll look at safety fundamentals. I'll look at safety issues that are affecting our vulnerable users. I'll look at safety measures. And then lastly, we'll also look at recommendations on how to address these challenges. Okay, apologies. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the most important thing, maybe that's also worrying, to all of us who are road safety practitioners, is the numbers. Over 1.35 million of people are killed on our roads annually. And I think the sad part is that most of them, almost 90%, if not more, are occurring in our low and medium income countries. And as someone who's from Africa, I mean, I'm one of those who are sort of experiencing this on daily basis. We all know, our sub-Saharan Africa, we are among the highest, in terms of fatalities, if you compare us with maybe Europe. If you look at the figures, 12.5 per 100 population on low and medium income countries is very, very high if you compare it with high income countries, where the figures are on average around 8.3 per 100,000 population. In Africa, for example, currently we're sitting at 27 per 100,000 population, which is very, very high. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Europe, for example, is on average, with the latest figures now, is at around 7, which is a concern. And we hope with this presentation, we'll be able to come up with measures that will improve the situation. I mean, the road fatalities, especially in low and medium income countries, have increased since 2013. On average, even with the interventions that have been there, you know, from your policymakers, with improvements, but the figures are still increasing. So it's clear that there's definitely a challenge that needs to be addressed. And of course, the majority of those who are the victims of these fatalities are our pedestrians, our cyclists, and those who are operating what we call our 2 or 3 wheelers or motorcycles. If you look at the diagram on this presentation, you'll see that, for example, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, the pedestrians volumes or pedestrians are the highest in terms of, or are the highest or the victims, if you compare them maybe with your Europe, for example. If you look at East Asia, look at the 2-wheelers there. I mean, that's the highest. And I'm sure we all are aware that in East Asia, the mode of traffic, I mean, of transport is your 2-wheelers or your motorcycles. Hence the highest, I mean, contribution in terms of fatalities. So it's definitely a challenge and a worrying factor. You know, hopefully with the interventions that we'll discuss, these trends will definitely go down. And if you look at Europe, the figures are slightly skewed or slightly different if you compare them with your low and medium income countries. And if you look at this report, which this is based on the 2018 report, Global Data Report by the World Health Organization. This is a distribution, you know, per user type. You'll see that, for example, your pedestrians in Africa, on average, there's 40% fatalities. You look at Southeast Asia, where the mode of transport is, you know, predominantly your 2-wheelers or motorcycles. The figures are very high, 43%. And maybe the combination of your 2-wheelers, pedestrians and cyclists is almost close to a two-thirds of what maybe the entire world is experiencing. So it's clear that these figures are very, very high and worrying. Okay, if one looks or maybe zooms more into the types of vulnerable road users, of course, the perception is that, you know, pedestrians and cyclists are the only ones, but there's more in terms of the users or the vulnerable road users that also contribute towards these fatalities. Of course, we've got what we refer to as our power 2-wheelers. In most cases, they are less stable, not really protected if you compare them with someone who's in a vehicle, for example. And in low and medium income countries, the ownership is very high. Countries like Indonesia, which is in Asia, Vietnam. In Africa, countries like Nigeria, they have the highest, you know, in terms of ownership of your 2-wheelers. And also a mode of transport for locals. And of course, we do have other types like your slow agricultural vehicles. These are your tractors. They're also less protected if you compare them with maybe your normal motor vehicle. And we also do have your less experienced, you know, drivers or the elderly as well, who are very slow in terms of reacting. And some of them, in the event of an accident, you know, the recovery is very difficult, and they end up, you know, being victims of these crashes. And of course, we also have your road workers, because our roads need to be maintained. And we've seen, them being victims as well, drivers not respecting your signage, especially in construction zones, and end up, crashing on them. So these are the vulnerable road users that are sort of not really recognized, and many, maybe the focus being on pedestrians and cyclists. And if one looks at the challenges and the characteristics of our pedestrians, we do have those who are just walking, maybe for going to work or school, or those who are doing just for leisure or exercising. As you can see with the illustration on your right, there are areas like this where you find that the conflict just amongst the pedestrians is very, very high. And of course, in terms of this pedestrian, we also have subgroups where you have your children, elderly, who also need to be protected, those with impaired mobility or working on crutches, and many, many more. And of course, in terms of your cyclists, you do have, I did mention earlier, your two wheelers. This is your motorcycles. In some countries, there's also the three-wheel cycles. And like I said earlier, this is the mode of transport, for most of our medium and middle-income countries. In fact, some of these motorcycles are also used, as a taxi. In countries like Nigeria, this is your normal taxi, because they are seen to be able to maneuver your traffic quicker. But then, in terms of protection, this is some of the highest risk, contributors in terms of fatalities. And of course, in high-income countries, your cyclists, or cycling is done, for recreation, or just, for fun. Some of us as part of sports. And of course, in terms of usage, it can be used by anyone, of any age. And there's also subgroups, to this cyclists, those that are pedal operated. And today, with this technology, we also have those that are electric assisted. And if one zooms into our two-wheelers, of course, they are preferred because of their low cost. I mean, they're affordable to many. And like I said earlier, they are preferred, especially where they are used as taxis, because they are quicker. And even where there's no formal, public transport facilities, they are the preferred mode. Of course, they're also reasonable in terms of your fuel. And where there's challenges in terms of congestion, we are also experiencing it here in South Africa. They are seen or believed to be quicker. And of course, like I did mention earlier, that in low medium income countries, they are definitely, in terms of ownership, they have a high ownership. But then the biggest challenge is that, the protection of the riders, and also with enforcement in some countries being a challenge. This leads to even more fatalities among the riders, because no one sometimes in other countries looks at enforcing and ensuring that we all adhere to the laws and the rules. I did mention earlier that there is others, obviously, like your farm vehicles, something similar to what we have on our illustration here. As you can see, there's no seat belt on this device. And sometimes they get mixed, with other mode of transport. And that's increasing, the risk, to the operators. We also have in some African countries, animal drawn vehicles that sometimes also shares our roads with other, motorized, traffic. And that also creates even more challenges to the users and operators. Because in most cases, those who are operating them are not really protected. And if one looks at factors that relate to the safety of vulnerable road users, they themselves sometimes are a threat to one another, especially where they are sharing, resources or sharing infrastructure. I mean, especially in countries where there's challenges in budget, you end up having cyclists, in conflict with your pedestrians. And it's mainly because of lack of resources. And of course, one other challenge is not only resources. Pedestrians and your cyclists are sometimes an afterthought. They're not really considered in planning. And there's also challenges in some countries where, there's a mushrooming of, settlements in areas that don't have or don't even allow for the construction or the implementation of such, infrastructure. So that's also a big challenge. That's the land use issue. And of course, the road users as well, the behavior is also one factor that also contributes, to challenges of road safety. And of course, some of the conflict that we have in our infrastructure, where your non-motorized users find themselves having to be in conflict with your motor vehicles or motorized vehicles, and simply because of lack of infrastructure. That's one of the challenge and factor that contributes to road safety challenges. And if one looks at factors for pedestrian crashes, this is the issue of drivers. I'm sure we all know that sometimes we end up having drivers who are less experienced on our roads. Drivers sometimes who are intoxicated. We also have challenges with vehicles that are not roadworthy. Sometimes we also have challenges with our roadway, maybe not really designed properly to accommodate, your vulnerable road users. Of course, there's social issues that also play a role. There's also an issue of lifestyle, or maybe in some countries there's also, the population density, that also has contributed immensely into, the challenges of crashes. And sometimes being a pedestrian, not really giving the attention and the treatment that, your motorist, gets. pedestrians in most cases are neglected and always an afterthought in every decision that is made. And if one looks at, reasons why, our crashes occur, among others, we have careless crossing. You would have pedestrians that are really not concentrating. Some of them are on their phones. Also, motorists and those who are disobeying your traffic lights, and thus posing a risk to pedestrians. So there's also a challenge of jaywalking. Sometimes there's also a misjudgment of a speed gap, thinking that the car is still very far. It really happens a lot, especially at night where the visibility is very poor. Of course, that is also maybe the biggest contributor. There is lack of facilities, because if there's no lights, maybe at night, then the risk is more on the pedestrians, because they are also not really visible. Some of them are also not really wearing clothing that make them easy to spot from a distance. If one looks at measures that are recommended, by PIARC, there's a number of them. Among others, first one, there is the visual segregation by edge markings. It's important that you demarcate areas where pedestrians, can walk. But in some instances, if you end up, reducing maybe the width of the lane that will be used by motorists, but that's also an advantage, because then the lanes are narrower. Then that's an advantage in terms of traffic calming. Of course, there's also options, for wider and paved shoulders, which might also, if not done correctly, contribute to speeding or even unsafe overtaking. It's important that in terms of lane width, if you provide, a lane that is not really thought, maybe properly implemented, or if it's a wider lane, that can also be misused. Of course, there's also an option to to segregate your footpath. It should be wide enough to accommodate your pedestrians. Obvious, you need to also look at the volumes, depending on the volumes in that particular area. There's also a need to have segregated lane for cyclists. Of course, at intersections, it's important that the conflict is well managed, and there's opportunities for the cyclists to cross safe without having to be in conflict with your motorized traffic. It's important to provide proper crossing facilities. In terms of public transport stops, it's important that they are linked to your footpath. Some of the interventions could be your cap and barriers. What we have implemented maybe in South Africa, for example, in areas where we knew there's high volumes of your illegal turns and where people would easily just cross without considering maybe the speed of the traffic. We implemented your barriers. That also helps in channeling your pedestrians to cross maybe in safer and dedicated places. Of course, traffic calming also plays a major role, especially in terms of ensuring that where there's high volumes of vulnerable road users, somehow the traffic is forced, to go at least at speeds that are manageable and safe. There's other measures that are specific for pedestrians, especially at intersections. Among others is to look at the zebra crossing. They can also be combined with your central refuge area and also combined with your traffic calming measures. There's also measures such as pedestrian fences. And fences help a lot, especially where you want to channel and to really guide pedestrians to cross specific areas. And that way you avoid a situation where they just choose the shortest and safe route. Of course, with refuge areas as well, they assist a lot, especially where pedestrians are crossing, maybe in what we call mid areas, because that way they can cross one lane and wait, for the traffic maybe to subside and cross the other lane. Of course, there's pavement markings that also restrict parking. There's also cabling that can also be, kept instead extensions that can be installed, as well as signage. And then for pedestrian crossings, crosswalks or signing, it's important to consider dedicated signs and markings. These are the signs that will be able to guide your pedestrians in ensuring that they make correct decisions before crossing. Whereas this can also be linked up with your traffic calming measures. And for pedestrian crosswalks, signals and lighting, it's important to use a pedestrian face at signals with symbols. That will help a lot to mitigate the risk of jaywalking. There's also an option to use a pedestrian face at signals that has a numerical countdown display. There's also acoustic signals or tactile knobs at crossings. One other thing that I also mentioned earlier is issue of lighting. For some of us who are from rural areas, sometimes lighting is a big challenge. So therefore, appropriate lighting is also important. And of course, sidewalk accessibility. It doesn't really help to construct a sidewalk that has obstructions or a sign in the middle. And of course, for work zones, it's also important that you provide enough protective barriers to ensure that the traffic and those who are working are safe from the traffic. There's also an option to use what we call cap ramps, especially at intersections. There's also an option to also add tactile strips across the width of sidewalks where they lead to crosswalk. Of course, it may be very difficult to implement in maybe in city areas, for example. Continue with the various measures for vulnerable road users. If one caters for pedestrians and cyclists crossing multiple lane road sections, some of our roads are very wide. it's important to consider reducing the speed limit, and also to implement your rumble strips. There's also some called Cosby lines that can also be looked at, because they at least help with that noise and ensuring that those who are about to cross in unsafe areas at least can be warned in advance. The introduction of a middle island is also an option, as well as a barrier. I did mention that where we come from, we have in some instances introduced your barriers. And of course, traffic signals for pedestrians or cyclists, obviously that also dependent on the volumes of traffic. And if one looks at your vulnerable road users at high traffic volume intersections, this is where the risk is very, very high. Some of the options there is to consider, maybe dedicated, cycle routes. Among others, you can also consider to modify your intersection, especially at the design stage, that will also cater for cyclists. Marking, signing, and signals at intersections are also very, very important and vital. Should be considered in a manner that pedestrians will be safe.
Dear Lawrence, can we speed up a little bit because we are running out of time?
Okay, now I'm almost there.
Yeah.
And of course, I did mention earlier the medians and refuge islands. That also helps in ensuring that your pedestrians can at least cross half width. And then finally, looking at the recommendations. These are recommendations from PIARC. Also in line with the safe system approach is that road design should include a self-explaining and failure forgiving roads. This is in line with the principles of the safe system approach. And it's also important that pedestrians are not an afterthought. Meaning, in terms of our designs, this should be the first thing that we think of. We should ask ourselves as designers that what if the person that is crossing is disabled, or maybe it's a child that is crossing, and how do we ensure that we cater and accommodate them in our designs? Of course, there are some key requirements to that. Among others, road safety. Road users need to be given enough time. The road must provide a safe view for everyone and the users. The road environment must correspond with the road users' perception logic. And I think that the most important thing that we tend to neglect is that it's important that we also come up with measures, to communicate, educate, and also enforce the laws to ensure that our vulnerable road users are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. It was a very comprehensive presentation. I don't see that. Yes, there is one question concerning whether we know any resources that offer digital speed limits signposting from roads in sub-Saharan Africa. So perhaps we can take note of this and send you directly a reply.
Okay.
which is very technical. I do have a small question, meaning that should we take into account in the safe system approach in the design of the road to guide not only the VRUs but also the other drivers to take care of the VRUs? So if there are any specific provisions to assist the other drivers to behave better towards the vulnerable road users.
Look, of course, in terms of the safe system approach, it's important that we design infrastructure that will ensure that in the event that or in the possibility of a crash, we all safe. And for me and for maybe for some of us, from Africa, I think our experience is that you need to provide facilities that will reduce maybe the conflict where possible between your vulnerable road users and motorists. And of course, from experience as well, is that there's that risk of your motorists not really protecting or maybe adhering to your design wishes, and therefore, and with the challenges of law enforcement that we're having, I believe, and with the approach that we do, is where possible to separate where you can.
Great. There is one more question about cattle on the road in agricultural areas. I don't think that cattle are considered as vulnerable road users. This is a topic which is dealt within the infrastructure design. We discussed infrastructure design for safety at the previous webinar. So this is more relevant to infrastructure and not really to the VRU discussion we have right now.
Yeah, maybe
yeah, please do, Lawrence.
Yes. Now, I wanted to say what we normally do is to provide underpasses, in our designs. That's what we've done here in South Africa, where of course, sometimes they are not really cheap, but that's maybe the easiest way to address that, especially where maybe the traffic is a bit higher. Then you provide an underpass that can allow your livestock to cross safely.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Lawrence, for this very comprehensive and very interesting presentation. And now we might proceed with the next presentation. I'm giving the next presentation. I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to be the presentation on human factors behavior. So we're going to talk quickly for some human factors fundamentals, and then the different behavior issues, and then we proceed with human factor safety measures and the recommendations. In fact, in terms of fundamentals, very quickly to say that human factors is in every part of our life a key issue. And we're talking about the normal human behavior and human factors, not the one with temporary mental or physical conditions, special conditions. So on road safety, human factors deals with the identification of road characteristics that are not according to human threshold limit and trigger accidents. So whatever is different than the normal and the usual travel behavior, walking behavior, driving behavior, then it is an issue that can produce crashes. And here we see that mistakes are happening everywhere, not only in driving, but mistakes do not necessarily lead to crashes. There are, as you see, that there are, if you have 5,000 operational mistakes, there are 500 driving mistakes, and this might lead to something like 20 crashes. So it is a very small percentage. However, on one hand, this is good because, of course, not every mistake leads to a crash. However, the most important thing is that the less mistakes and the less driving mistakes, we have less lower probability of a crash, so less casualties, less fatalities. So we have to work on reducing the number of mistakes. And if we go to this fundamental slide about the behavioral risk factors, I would personally say that there are three main risk factors: speeding, speeding, and speeding. I'm saying this because speeding is not at the top just in this list. It is at the top because it is the number one risk factor, which can be found on a very high percentage of crashes, going more than 50%, especially on urban areas. Of course, we're talking very often about the 5 killers: speeding, drinking and driving, seatbelt use, helmet use, and distraction, which are really omnipresent on crashes all over the world. There are some difference more or less, but these 5 killers are considered the key risk factors. Of course, we can add more with fatigue, with red light violation as additional ones. Despite the progress made in improving legislation across the key risk factors, enforcement remains a major challenge in most of the countries. We see these fundamental graphics where green is high enforcement, red is low enforcement. We see that green is not found very often, and there is more green and orange colors, meaning that enforcement is lagging behind all over the world, especially in all over the low and middle income countries. And this is something to tackle because we should always be aware that enforcement, it is the only one so direct and fast measure bringing results. Then we might see in this list the human factor issues and the human behavior issues. In terms of human factors, we have the road users reaction time, wrong directional orientation, reading time for simple text, upper limit for perception of a number of objects as location, optical illusions, wrong responses. Where on behavioral issues, we have enforcement, licensing, violation of traffic rules, pathological personal issues, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohols, losing control due to diseases, impaired reaction time, and risky behavior. We distinguish between human factors and human behavior. And then we can see, as reported very consistently and systematically in the PIARC road safety documents, the three rules, the 6-second rule, the field of view, and the logic rule. The 6-second rule says that the average driver needs 4 to 6 seconds to adapt to new driving requirements. And this happens in critical locations like junctions, access from smaller streets or private places, lane merges, bus stops, motorway entrance and exit, or entrance and exit to towns. So there we have to adapt in have sufficient time to adapt with more 4 or more seconds available. The second rule is the field of view rule. The road must offer road users a safe field of view and pre-program the correct choice of speed. And this is an issue when we have monotonous approaching sections and surroundings. So when we have long or far visible approaching sections, asymmetrical posts, incorrect optical setting, non-vertical appearance of the different roadside objects or structure over the road, which are asymmetrical. And the third rule is the logic rule, where the road has to follow the driver's perception logic, has to be logical, formed by their experience and recent perceptions. So we have to pay attention in discontinuous bends in roads, multiple critical locations leading to overload of information processing, sharp curves and traffic signs and intersections after tunnels. Direction of sign differ significantly from perceived road course and traffic control devices not visible against background. We see these are heavy issues heavily interrelated between human factors and infrastructure. The measures to address human factors are included in the UN Decade of Actions for Road Safety as a key area. We see speed management, we see legal framework, we see first of all the safe road use as issues in the decade. And the key issue is that the road transport system needs to anticipate and accommodate for human errors and prevents consequent deaths or serious injury. In the safe road use measures, first of all, we have to enact and enforce road safety in all key risk factors with speed limits, blood alcohol concentration limits, mandate the use of protective equipment, restrict the use of handheld electronic devices, and establish a dedicated enforcement agency, traffic safety for traffic safety enforcement. This is a fundamental measures area. And then we have to ensure road infrastructure taking into account the needs of all road users, the VRUs, the drivers, the pedestrians, everybody, and facilitate safe behaviors, including clear road signals and road markings that are intuitive, the use of roundabouts and traffic calming designs like speed humps, and the physical separation of road users, especially the VRUs. Getting into the 3 rules of human factors, we can say that for the 6-second rule, in order to not surprise the driver, we have to remove visual objects. We have to construct traffic islands. In order to ensure visibility by corrective measures, we have to use attention guiding visual clues. And in order to give advice by warning measures, we have to install speed limits, prohibit overtaking, and set up warning signs. For the field of view rule countermeasures, if we want to design the field of view, we have to create sinuous road alignment against monotony, create symmetry of superstructures. In order to correct the field of view, we have to use eye-catching objects and create complete setting of outer curves and cover non-parallel optical guiding lines. And for placing warnings in the field of view, again, we install speed limits, ban overtaking, and set up warning signs. And for the logic rule of countermeasures, in order to design logical road sections, we have to avoid logical breaks, indicate change of function whenever is the case, correct illogical road sections by using special road surfacing as colored areas, pavement changes, etc. And in order to place warnings in illogical road sections, we have to install speed limits, ban overtaking, and set up warning signs. You might see that installing speed limits and managing speed is omnipresent in every rule of addressing the human factors. Then, of course, PIARC highlights the value of evaluating based on the human factors method with special on-site inspection, checking compliance with road standards, visiting with the different weather conditions and lighting conditions, which are can produce crashes, inspection at network level, and inspection at high accident concentration sections. On that purpose, there is a human factors evaluation tool developed by PIARC with a human factors evaluation score. There is full reference in the documents that you see in this presentation of the list of reference at the end, containing validated and reliable road characteristics that cause misperceptions, driving mistakes, and can result in accidents, addressed in a comprehensive evaluation process and approach. And concluding with the recommendations about human factors and road safety in low and middle income countries, there is a fundamental recommendation to include human factors in the road design process to achieve a self-explaining road design. A measure based on the 3 classes of human factor related triggers, developing a user-friendly road allowing drivings to adapt. A self-explaining road providing drivers with well-designed and field of view, and road characteristics following a logical sequence. On that purpose, there are several documents and several tools by PIARC, like the human factors method, where with the assistance of human factor experts and road safety inspection and audit and evaluation, support all the activities for better safety in low and middle income countries. Of course, all these are found in the PIARC reports, which are available all online, and you can have also the links at this presentation, which certainly will be available just after this webinar. And this concludes the presentation about human factors, and perhaps we might move to discussion if there are any questions. This time I cannot put a question to myself. I can, but given that we are a little bit, just a little bit needing some time, I would suggest that we conclude the presentation on human factors and safety in low and middle income countries at this with this slide on recommendation, and perhaps we can proceed to the next presentation, which is vehicle safety, a presentation by
528,000.
Yes, please. I'm afraid we cannot hear you very well. Please, can you try one more time? Or we can write something in the chat and we reply in the chat. So let's proceed with the vehicle safety presentation, and let's invite Ana Luz Jimenez Ortega, the Provincial Traffic Director in Sevilla in the Government Directorate of Traffic in Spain, Chair of the New Mobility and its Impact on Road Infrastructure and Transport Task Force of PIARC, to talk us about vehicle safety. Ana Luz, you can take the screen, and thank you to be with us.
Thank you very much. I'm sharing my screen. I hope it is available for all of us.
Yes, we see it. Perhaps you can go full screen.
Yes, I think it's okay. I will try. Okay. It's okay.
Full screen, it's fine. It's
okay,
fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to make the presentation about vehicle road safety, about vehicle safety. And I want to thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to follow the same scheme that are being followed in the previous presentation. So we are going to talk about vehicle safety fundamentals, issues, measures, and we'll finalize with some recommendations. Which are these fundamentals? First, we are going to look what United Nations has done detecting or taking the importance of the 8 priority safety standards that has been appointed for vehicles. So let's have a brief look on those safety standards that United Nations consider that are priority for safety vehicles. First and second are related to frontal impact protection and side impact protection. These are described in Regulation 94 and 95. And this standard ensure that cars withstand the impacts of a frontal or on a side impact crash when tested at certain speeds. And now we are talking again about the speed like in human behavior and vulnerable road user and in management safety. So speed is in all the presentation because it's in all the road safety environment. The third priority standard that United Nations has identified is the electronic stability control, Regulation 140, that prevents skidding and loss of control in cases of oversteering or understeering, and is really effective in reducing crashes. The fourth standard identified is pedestrian front protection. This is related to vulnerable road users. Is Regulation 127 and provides softer bumpers and modifies the front ends of vehicles that reduce severity of a pedestrian impact with a car. The fifth and sixth priority standard identified are related to seatbelts. Not only the seatbelts itself, but the seatbelt anchorage. It's Regulation 14 and 16 and ensure that seatbelts are fit in vehicles when they are manufactured and assembled, because this guarantees that the behavior of this security system is the best they have to achieve. The seventh priority standard is related to child restraints in Regulation 129 and ensure that the child seat is in place with the adult seat belt and that isofix child restraint anchorage points are fit to secure the restraint. It's very important to prevent from child injuries or fatalities. The final priority United Nations safety standard identified is motorcycle anti-lock braking system in Regulation 78 that helps the rider to maintain control during an emergency braking situation. So it is related to vulnerable road users, and this is a standard that helps to improve their safety. Having a look on how these fundamentals, these standards are spread in low or medium income countries, it has been found that none of the low income countries have implemented any of the 8 priority United Nations vehicle safety standards. And only the 4% of lower middle income countries have implemented priority United Nations related to seatbelt anchorage, front crashes security, pedestrian or motorcycle anti-lock braking system. And regarding the upper middle income countries, the 16% have implemented front and side crashing protection. The 13% have implemented electronic stability control and pedestrian protection, and the 5% have implemented motorcycle anti-lock braking system. So still there is a lack to improve these standards in these places. Regarding the issues related to vehicle systems, we have to distinguish between passive safety systems that intend to limit the damage caused to drivers and passengers in the event of a crash, like airbags, seatbelt, helmets, and so on, and those active safety systems that play a preventive role in mitigating crashes by providing advanced warning or by providing the driver with additional assistance in steering or controlling the vehicle, like the mentioned anti-lock braking system and electronic stability control. What has been found is that in many low and medium income countries, vehicle safety is not effectively regulated through design standard or maintained through mandatory vehicle inspection schemes. This is very important to have a previous standard, but to maintain the inspections during the life of the vehicle. The vehicle safety features have penetrated countries in a very different extent, and standard equipment in new vehicles differs a lot between countries. And depending on regulation in place per destination market, vehicles are produced with different safety measures. So automobile companies frequently de-specify life-saving features in newer models sold in countries where regulatory frameworks do not require these features. So we can see that a good regulation has a real impact in the cars that are produced and sold in these countries. So it's a very key question to have to maintain in mind. But regarding vehicles and safety vehicles, it's very important to point out the problem that implies the overweight vehicles. Weight limits for road freight vehicles typically cover the aspect of gross vehicle weight and the axle load. Gross vehicle weights differ greatly between countries and continents, and axle loads are linked to infrastructure design parameter and maintenance. What has been found is that in low and medium income countries, there are very low compliance levels due to overloading for cost savings and lack of enforcement. But which are the effects of this overweight? On pavement, there can be a very bad effects on the surface due to overweight, depending on type of traffic, load distribution, the vehicle weight and suspension, the type of pavement, and some environmental factors like temperature, water presence. In unpaved roads that they are mostly present in low and medium income countries, these are the type of roads most affected by overloading. So this is a question that is not only important due to the safety performance of the overloaded vehicles in case of crashes, but we have to take this overweight into account due to the funding needed to maintain the roads due to this aspect. So linked to these issues, what measures related to vehicle safety can be taken? Let's have a look again to the United Nations Decade of Action for Road Safety, where we can find what to do, how to do it, and who has to do it. And in this document, we have safe vehicle as a principle in what we have to do. Safe vehicles have a direct impact in improving road safety in all countries worldwide. This document established we have a very ambitious goal of reducing road traffic deaths by at least 50% from 2021 to 2030. And as has been exposed during the session, we have a safe system approach, and we have to ensure safety not only inside the vehicle, but to outside the vehicle. So we have to take into account that the vehicle has to protect passenger and driver, but to the other users of the road. And vehicle safety is increasingly critical to the prevention of crashes and contribute in a very substantial way to reduction in the number of deaths and serious injuries on the road. This is the scheme we have seen, but I would like to mention the proactive of the safety approach is very important. So from the road, from the vehicle, we are working for the same issue to get this safety concept. And redundancy is crucial because human mistakes are going to appear, and the road and the vehicle has to make up for this to prevent from having a fatal consequences. But as we have talked a bit before, regulation is very important and has been pointed out through this United Nations standard, priority standard. So applying an harmonized legislative standard for vehicle design and technology will help to improve the level of safety worldwide. Governments should provide through legislation a minimum set of safety standards for all vehicles. And when we talk about vehicle, we have to talk about traditional vehicles, passenger cars, vans, trucks, buses, powered 2- and 3-wheelers, but two informal modes prevalent in many countries, like tuk-tuk, bicycles, and of course we have to take into account also pedestrians. So the need of high quality harmonized safety standards is clear, and we have to look again to United Nations critical safety standards. As it has been pointed out that the standards on front and side impact to ensure that occupants are protected in a front and side impact crash are essential. The safety belts and they are encouraged for all seats to ensure that they are working properly. It's essential to get better level of safety worldwide. So fixed child restraint anchor points are key to guarantee the safety of the child into the car. Electronic stability control to prevent skidding has demonstrated that it's a very, very effective safety standard to prevent from losing of control. Advanced emergency braking is essential to reduce collisions. Pedestrian protection is necessary to be implemented because the vehicle is not all working, it's not being used alone in the road, but there are a lot of interaction with pedestrians, with vulnerable road users. As having said in our presentation, motorcycle helmets certified according to international harmonized standards are necessary for this type of users. Anti-lock braking system and daytime running lights for motorcycle are two key standards to improve safety in this for users of this type of vehicles. And again, we're talking about the speed because intelligent speed assistance system can help drivers to keep to speed limits in the safe area. And eCall or accident emergency call system help to trigger an emergency response by an in-vehicle sensor that will help. This is a very interesting standard to be spread to help in case that the crashes occur, to have a better assistance and the rate of supervision will be better. Regarding the action to ensure in vehicle safety, it's important to set the mandatory certification and registration system for new and used vehicles based on established safety requirements and combined with return inspection. The car should be inspection when it starts its life, and during all this life should be inspection to guarantee that the safety performance is in a correct way. But we know that vehicles move from one country to another, and regulation for the export and import of used vehicles that are accompanied by inspection at entry and exit points and mandatory periodic technical inspection of vehicles became essential to maintain this safety level. But two, the demand for safer vehicles by encouraging independent new car assessment programs has demonstrated that it's a good measure to improve, to ensure this vehicle safety. Regarding the problem that has been pointed out of overweight vehicles, the research has sought out that legislation is the first step. A well-formulated legal test should be very clear about precise definition of the vehicles considered, precise definition of the types of axle and axle sets concerned, precise definition of the scope of the network on which the legislation is applied, the exact weight limit, the relevant derogations under which the legislation does not apply, the methods of detection that can be applied to discover violations, and the consequences of this violation. The research shows that it's better to have a not very large set of rules, but a very clear rules that are respected for users. Besides the legislation, education of transport operators and all actors in the transport chain regarding the application of legislation and its modalities became crucial to combat against these overweight vehicles that are a problem for safety and for the life of the pavement on roads. And of course, proper information regarding the consequences of overloading to all the actors implied is very important to get this mitigation that is needed. Continuing with this overweight vehicle mitigation, it's possible the use of low-tech to high-tech equipment for the detection of overloading in static weighing scales, immovable static scales, and weighing in motion. And of course, it's needed an effective enforcement of weight limits by deployment, the more staff and increasing fines that could lead to higher compliance and decreasing the safety risk that it implies. And of course, penalties are a measure to mitigate these overweight vehicles, not only for financial, it's a fine, but to in operational way, immobilization and offloading the vehicle, and about institutional due to the loss of reputation for the operator that do not use the weights in a proper way. But I would like to have a short mention about what is coming in the field of vehicles. Vehicle automation is a very good opportunity to improve road safety, Smart vehicles or connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles are bringing us a very different mobility environment. If we consider that 94% of road accidents are caused by human distraction, as has been mentioned by George, maybe this could be could have a key role to get a safer system. Autonomous vehicle could prevent all crashes caused by impaired driving, and driver disengagement is critical phase in which accident with others may occur. The recommendation that can be formulated for low and medium income countries should start with small pilot deployments of the most major automated service that are working or running around the world. This is to make the funding needed be used in a more efficient way. And the recommendation, of course, is to improve and to try these pilots in those safety-related automated services. These are preferable, and road safety is the highest motivation for this deployment. They can have a very good impact to improve safety, and as there's a lot of research and experience around the world, so it's better to research and to know what is happening in other parts of the world and to try small pilots with the results, with positive results in other parts of the world. So to finalize with the part of recommendation, vehicle safety recommendation, I think we have these highlights. Providing a safe operating environment for road users is a primary responsibility for the government and industry organization that design, build, maintain, and regulate roads and vehicles. Regarding vehicle automation, low and medium countries, government and transport industry should be prepared to avoid being caught off guard and not to get left behind the global community. There is some very interesting thing happening, and maybe they can help in these countries. Of course, the problem of overloading is really important, and prevention and mitigation of this problem will include legislation, prevention and education, detection and enforcement, and penalization about that. As you know, you can find relevant reports in PIARC, and this presentation will be spread for all those interested in. And I think I respect the scheduled time and get here if you have any question. So thank you very much.
Analuth, thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation, very interesting, very technical, and very useful and critical for safety in the low and middle income countries. A lot of information, of course, with reference to PIARC work. There is one question which was sent a little bit, it was sent to me directly, saying whether there is a place where it is published how many countries have applied the UN regulations, if you are aware.
I think that in UNECE homepage, there is the information about this regulation. They are published there, and there I think I remember there are some figures about that. So I think it can be found there.
Great. I think also that the World Health Organization Global Status Report has a lot of information, including the regulations applied in the countries.
Yes, WHO. Yes. They have some information too, some figures too.
There is one more question which is not for vehicle safety. I don't know if you see it and you would like to comment, or I could comment, says besides government policy enforcement, what additional measures do you believe can be implemented to promote safe driving by persuading drivers to change their unsafe behaviors? Which factors should be considered when developing systems, software applications with this goal in mind?
Mm-hmm.
Any idea on this?
Well, in the experience in Spain is that to change driver behavior and to make drivers to respect the rules, you have to combine first information and explanation of how or why this is a problem for safety, and then you apply the informants. But it's necessary to be together, information and education, and then enforcement. And we have had good results with automated enforcement, because it's better perceived by drivers, because all drivers are measured by the same system. So it has a better acceptance than human enforcement only. It's a complementary way.
Yeah, and there is a lot of work by the car industry with software and systems assisting advanced driver assistance systems, but also warning. And lately there is also some telematics applications which can assist the improvement of behavior. If there is no other question, I think that we conclude also this part of the presentation, and we thanks a lot, Anna Luz, for this excellent discussion about vehicle safety. And if you would allow me to make just one slide of conclusions overall. First of all, to say that in the two webinars, we had more than 700 people subscribed. And all these people, you're going to receive all the presentations and the recordings very, very soon, where you can find also a reference to all the PIARC work, which is very rich and very interesting for any use, especially for improving safety in the low and middle income countries. Of course, PIARC Road Safety Manual, it is the key document to use. Of course, we have to work within the safe system approach as a critical step for safety in the low and middle income countries. And for engineers and designers, we should not forget to include vulnerable road users in the design process and include self-questions such as, what if a child, blind, elderly, disabled person is crossing? In order to save also all these VRU lives, accounting for more than 50% of fatalities in most of the countries. And before closing, I need a small reminder about the major congress, the World Congress, World Road Congress of PIARC in Prague, where we're going to host a workshop on boosting road safety in low and middle income countries. Going beyond these two webinars in a more interesting discussion. So one more reason to come in beautiful Prague for PIARC Congress, but also for the workshop on LMIC road safety. And with this, we'll conclude also this second webinar. We thank you all for this participation and very useful discussions. I don't know, Robin, if you would like to make a short closing statement.
I think you did it You did it for me. I just wanted to invite all participants to Prague. I can tell you that this Congress is going to be an extraordinary event. We already have 3,000 people registered, almost 40 ministers attending. I did not count the number of countries that will be present, but besides I would say, our usual participants, the Congress is going to be really very international, with a high participation of low and middle income countries that we had never seen before in PIARC congresses. So it is still time to register until the deadline for standard rate has been extended to September the 20th. For those who need a visa, of course, you are slightly running out of time, but please consider this. You will not regret it. Thank you. And thank you, George, for having coordinated and achieved all this tremendous work. And thank you to all our today's lecturers, and as well as to our interpreters whom we do not see, who work in the background, but who did a tremendous job as usual. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.